So we hear a lot about AI literacy, including from me, because I always talk about AI literacy as a really important response to concerns about AI, concerns about whether AI is trustworthy, concerns about AI safety. So this is the literacy panel, and we're delighted because we've got a cross-section of industry, government and academia and social enterprise for this panel. So we've got the full suite, and I'm really pleased to introduce it. So we're going to, you can see a lot about the panel in the program, but we're going to start with Steph, who's, and I'm not going to do titles because it's on my piece of paper. So we've got Steph from Google, we've got Kate from Microsoft, we've got Brett from the National AI Centre, not Lee. We've got Evelyn from AVPN, and we've got Greg from the University of Melbourne. And they are going to talk to us. We're going to have a snapshot. In fact, we're going to have a journey of AI literacy. We're going to start with our big vision from Google. We're going to move to some resource issues with Microsoft. We're going to talk about the Australian ambition with the National AI Panel and Brett. We're going to talk about regional literacy, which is an initiative for AVPN and Google, and then we're going to turn to the human element of how people do become literate. I'm going to get Steph to start, and we also have a handout for you, because this is a literacy panel, so we have resources. So do join us, and I'm also going to hand out my handout.
Good morning, everybody. I normally like to try and speak off the cuff if I can, but that is not going to happen today, so I hope you bear with me as I read through my remarks, because it is such an important topic. I want to make sure that we cover the issues that are important here today. So it's an honour to be here in Melbourne at the University of Melbourne Centre for AI and Digital Ethics for this vital gathering, the International AI Cooperation and Governance Forum 2025. The theme, Inclusive AI, Who Builds, Who Benefits, could not be more relevant or more urgent. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to our host, Jeannie Paterson, Director of the Centre, who will also be moderating the discussion today. Jeannie, thank you for bringing this crucial conversation to the forefront. I'm also incredibly excited to share this stage with such a distinguished group of leaders. I want to take a moment to specifically recognise the AVPN and Evelyn here today. Partnerships are the foundation of true impact, and the AVPN is our principal grantee for Google's AI Opportunity Fund in the Asia-Pacific region. Evelyn, thank you and the AVPN team for your invaluable work. Together, through the fund, we are ensuring that the transformative power of AI training reaches the communities that need it the most. We stand at a unique moment in history. AI is moving from a niche technology to a ubiquitous tool that will reshape how we live, work and collaborate. Here in Australia and across the APAC region, the potential for AI to drive productivity, solve complex challenges and unlock new economic growth is immense. To fully realise the potential of AI, Google has recently released a policy roadmap that we call the 10 AI Policy Gold Standards. It argues that capturing this economic opportunity isn't automatic. It requires deliberate action across 3 phases: building ready infrastructure, driving broad-based adoption, and creating an enabling policy environment. However, the question before this forum of who builds and who benefits highlights a critical challenge: ensuring the AI revolution doesn't deepen existing divides. And I think that was some of the theme that started to come out through the last session. For Google, responsible innovation is not just about mitigating risks. It is fundamentally about ensuring equitable access to the opportunities that AI creates. And that brings us directly to the focus of this panel, AI literacy. Governments, industry and civil society worldwide have committed to improving AI literacy. In fact, implementing a comprehensive AI skills plan is one of our core policy gold standards. But what does that exactly mean and for what purpose? Despite the high adoption rates, the challenge is clear. Only 9% of Australians feel that they have a strong grasp of how to use AI tools effectively, and we must close this skills and confidence gap. But why is it urgent? It's because the labour market is shifting. Jobs that require AI skills already command a significant wage premium, averaging 56% in some markets. But here is the promising news for inclusivity. Research suggests that AI often benefits novice and lower skilled workers the most. For example, studies in call centres show that while experts saw marginal gains, newer workers saw a 34% productivity jump, effectively helping them move down the experience curve faster. This is the true promise of AI literacy. It acts as an equaliser. In our view at Google, AI literacy is more than simply knowing how to use a generative tool. It is a comprehensive framework built on 3 pillars. The first is critical understanding, the ability to understand what AI is, how it works, and why it sometimes fails, the data it relies on, and the ethical implications of its output. The second is practical capability, the skills required to integrate AI tools effectively into professional workflows, whether you're a marketing professional, a tradesperson, a regional farmer, or a GR expert, as some of us may be. And the third is strategic application. For leaders and business owners, the foresight to identify and apply AI for competitive advantage. This is why capability building and literacy are central to Google in Australia and across the region. We believe industry has a profound responsibility to invest directly in the human capital required to leverage AI responsibly. That responsibility is twofold. We are heavily invested through the AI Opportunity Fund for Australia and New Zealand in inclusive skilling. This is a dedicated commitment to provide practical AI skills to 1 million people across the region, including small businesses. Small businesses are the largest employers in our economy, and we're ensuring that they aren't left behind. For example, we're providing training modules that show owners how to use AI for inventory, customer service, and growth. And for regional workers, we're looking at bringing foundational skills directly to their communities, unlocking potential in sectors like Australian agriculture. But beyond skilling, our $1 billion Digital Future initiative focuses on partnerships and deep research to solve Australia's biggest challenges. And I want to share 3 examples with you. The first is how we're collaborating with the University of Western Australia. We are tackling a specific barrier to inclusion, which is language. We're working to ensure that speech recognition models accurately understand Aboriginal English so that First Nations communities aren't left behind by the voice-activated future. We're working with the Garvan Institute to explore new possibilities in genomic medicine, and with the University of Newcastle on exploring the viability of geothermal energy. These initiatives are about ensuring that the benefits of AI are not felt just in efficiency gains, but in areas of critical national importance. Ultimately, AI literacy is a prerequisite for effective governance. We cannot regulate what we do not understand. A populace, a workforce, and a government that are all critically literate in AI are better equipped to shape the regulatory environment. And this brings me to a concept we emphasised in a recent submission to the Productivity Commission. Championing a pro-innovation strategic framework for AI is, at its core, an act of economic stewardship. AI presents Australia with an economic opportunity of generational significance, but this dividend is not guaranteed. To secure it, we must secure that in our rush to regulate, we don't accidentally lock out small businesses out of the tools that they need to compete. We have a unique opportunity to be a smart, fast follower, learning from the challenges faced by frameworks in other regions where high compliance costs often hurt the very SMEs that we're trying to help. Instead, at Google, we're advocating for a proportionate approach. We urge governments to lead by example by adopting AI in the public sector and to leverage existing regulations as a starting point rather than reinventing the wheel. This prevents fragmentation and allows us to focus on what matters, making sure that the benefits are shared. We remain committed to working with regulators, academics like those here at the University of Melbourne, and our value partners in civil society to build this future. A future where AI is developed responsibly and its benefits are genuinely shared, moving us closer to the goal of truly inclusive AI. I would like I look forward to the insights that will emerge from this discussion. Now I'd like to hand over to Jeannie to guide us through the panel AI literacy, for what and for whom. Thank you.
Okay, so we heard a little bit more about, in fact, quite a deep more about AI literacy in that presentation. Thank you so much. We heard about Southeast Asia. We heard about workers. We heard about small businesses. Sometimes forgotten. Australia's quite unique. We have a lot of small businesses, and a lot of those small businesses are literally owned by two people. A big country, lots of small businesses and lots of regional business. We heard regional. And we also heard about the real benefits to individuals who are able to master, I guess, AI, but also that important point that I always talk about. We need understanding to participate in regulation. Decisions about AI need to be made by people who are using and affected by AI, and for that they need a degree of literacy so that they can make their own choices. And we also heard about inclusion. We're thinking about how First Nations people and people in regional areas participate and their decisions about AI. So what we decided we would do with this panel is, because we have such great expertise here, is we're essentially going to move across those topics and think about them a bit more. And our first speaker, or our first reflector, I guess, is Kate Seward, who's at Microsoft, and is going to talk to us a little bit about these infrastructure power questions. So off you go, Kate.
Thanks.
Do you want to stand up or do you want to sit?
Well, people can see and hear me, and everyone in the room's
great.
comfortable. I'm quite comfortable in my...
Because us academics have to stand to talk.
No,
we literally cannot talk
in
sitting
my
down.
chair.
It's impossible.
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Jeannie, and thank you, Steph. I think that whilst in the technology sector, Google and Microsoft are, at times fierce competitors, I think a lot of what Steph said really resonates with me. I think there's a lot of similarities in how our companies are thinking about AI adoption, about AI inclusivity, and about AI policy, both here in Australia but across the region and the world. And so that my comments weren't duplicative and there was a bit of diversity, I wanted to just take a slightly different tact to what I wanted to share with you. And so if I'm going to sort of zoom out to a bit more of a macro lens here. And so if we think about the history of technology adoption, generative AI has taken off faster than any technology in history. OpenAI's ChatGPT reached 100 million users in 2 months. DeepSeek took just 7 days. I tried to find some good data about Google or Microsoft, and Copilot didn't give me some snazzy stats. So instead I'm going to give you a comparison of Facebook, which is a ubiquitous tool that probably everyone in this room uses. It took 4.5 years to get to the 100 million user mark. So if we think about that accelerated pace, it's like nothing we've experienced before. And so as we come up on this sort of 3rd anniversary of ChatGPT and the generative AI era, Microsoft really wanted to put some research behind understanding the reach of AI across the world. And only 2 weeks ago, we published a new report on AI diffusion to really understand the data behind what was happening at a global level. And history teaches us that progress of any sort needs 3 things to be evolving together: the innovation, the infrastructure, and then the end use adoption. To give you a historical comparison of electricity, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, but for electricity to spread across society and the economy, you needed power grids to be built. You needed power poles and wires to connect every building or every home. Then you needed a whole industry around electrical appliances to be plugged into the socket. And then finally, you needed the end person to, switch the switch on the wall and use that appliance. And the same is now true for AI. And until now, the conversation, I think, has really focused on the innovation and the infrastructure. And I know we've got a broad international audience in this room. If we think about the innovation and the infrastructure, there are 2 big players, both of whom are represented here today, and that's the US and China. The US and China are the big players in terms of the big tech companies that are creating the innovations, but those 2 countries also house 86% of the supercompute power in the world. What our AI diffusion index did was look at those things, but also looked at that third bucket of the end user. And if we look at the leaderboard of AI diffusion across the economy, the countries that are in the lead are not the US and China. It's not the countries that are innovating or building or owning the infrastructure. Top of the list is the United Arab Emirates, followed by Singapore, and I know we've got friends from Singapore in the room today. Australia comes 11th, and perhaps surprisingly, Australia comes ahead of markets that we think of being as very innovative and advanced, such as Israel, such as Germany, and perhaps most surprisingly, the US. So what I want to focus on when we're talking about AI literacy and AI inclusion, as Steph touched on, is if we look at that leaderboard of adoption, we're already seeing across 150 countries for which we have data, a really significant divide emerging in AI adoption. And this is something I think we really need to start talking about when we're talking about AI literacy. There are foundations that need to be in place in any country for broad AI adoption. I'm going to give you some figures now that are pretty staggering when we look at this AI divide. There are 8.1 billion people who live in the world. Only 7.4 billion people have electricity. And of course, you need electricity to use AI. Only 5.5 billion people in the world can access the internet. And of course, you need the internet to use AI. Only 4.2 billion people have digital skills, and that's what we're going to be talking about here today. That's what the panel before us was talking about. You need digital skills to use AI. So if we put these numbers together, there are 3.9 billion people in the world that are remaining left out as the data currently stands. And this is a divide that I think we need to address. Steph mentioned regional Australia and regional communities in her opening remarks. The data's showing another really crucial divide that we need to pay attention to, and that's a divide between urban and rural communities within countries. And this is pretty consistent across all the countries for which we have data, and it's happening in every country, including the US, Australia, and elsewhere. Urban communities are adopting AI 50% faster than regional communities. So even if a country like Australia is currently in 11th place, we have a domestic divide that we need to start thinking about. And so I'll frame it slightly differently to Steph, but we think there are three elements that need to be brought together. The concepts are very similar, the vocabulary is slightly different, and that's technology, talent, and trust. We talk a lot about technology, there's good reason for that, but let's talk about talent. Without people having those foundational elements I outlined, but it's also without them having the right skills, we simply cannot diffuse AI. And Steph touched on it, AI diffusion means AI fluency for everyone, and then it also means more targeted AI skills for those who are building the infrastructure, building the models, building the technology, and for those in organisations that are thinking about implementation and management of technologies within an organisation. And so this is about a whole skilling ecosystem. Steph talked about some of the things that Google's doing. Microsoft's got lots of similar programs, including here in Australia, where we've got a commitment to skill up 1 million people with basic AI fluency across Australia and New Zealand. We announced only in July Microsoft Elevate, which is a program to try to hit skilling in the education and not-profit sectors. The handouts have some links, so I won't spend any more time going over to that. But I think we share this sense that Steph touched on of a profound responsibility for industry to be part of this skilling process. But I think what the panel before us also touched on is that it can't be left to industry alone, and every society is going to need a kind of whole of ecosystem approach to this skilling question, and that's why I'm really looking forward to hearing from others on the panel around what different parts of the ecosystem need to be doing. And Evelyn's going to touch on it a bit more at a national level, but I think we do need to be mindful that each country is going to need its own national skilling plan so that it is respectful of local values and local cultures, so it fits within the local education structures. And so that's the talent bit, and I'm going to close now with trust. And for those of you who are lucky enough to hear from me again this afternoon, we're going to be talking about AI safety and a lot more about trust. But I think when we're talking about trust, we are not going to get AI diffusion, and we're not going to bridge those divides I highlighted without people having trust in the technology. That's about it being built and deployed ethically and responsibly. But we also know that if people are using the tools, if people understand the tools, if people have a level of comfort with the tools, they will not only trust it more, they will be more discerning and more critical, and that is also crucial to the trust question. So I look forward to talking a little bit more about that this afternoon, and I have no doubt that National AI Centre is thinking about all these problems too.
Thanks so much, Kate. Now, I've found my phone. People will notice that I'm going to spend the day losing my phone and finding it again. So now I can tell you that Steph Lovett is the Director of Government Affairs and Public Policy for Australia and New Zealand for Google. I am so sorry for not mentioning that before. Kate Seward is the Director of Corporate and External and Legal Affairs for Microsoft. And now we're having Dr. Brett, who is the Strategy and Growth Lead at the National AI Centre. And I'm going to abuse my chair's privilege by saying I'm glad you got that critical word in there, Kate, right at the end, because we're universities and we also love critical thinkers. So over to you, Brett.
100%. Good afternoon, folks. As noted, I'm here representing the National AI Centre, which is the government's lead body, helping industry to unlock the economic benefits of AI. So it's wonderful when I have such a wonderful tee up to what I want to talk about, because I don't need to do the establishing pieces. I'm going to talk to a bit of a sort of a mirror of what Kate was talking about there, in the sense that we want to try to ensure that our body is about ensuring the end users are adopting and safely using the AI tools within Australia. So those people who are adopting, how can we help them innovate safely with this AI? National AI Centre were established in 2021, originally as part of CSIRO, and then we got moved into the Department of Industry, Science and Resources. But I'll just sort of note for everyone's benefit, we're an entirely industry-facing body. We don't do policy, we don't do that sort of legislative piece. So while we're within government, we are definitely an industry-facing. How can we help industry to adopt AI? Since I recognise that we're talking with a bunch of academics in the room here, I'll start by sort of highlighting a couple of studies and really pick up on Kate's last point around trust, because I think they're illuminating to the AI literacy question within Australia. So, and how we're going to chart the way forward for industry adoption of AI in Australia. First of all, I'm at the University of Melbourne. University of Melbourne did a great study earlier this year with KPMG, where they surveyed 48,000 people across 47 different countries, and they showed that Australia was in the bottom 20% of the OECD countries as far as trust in AI systems. So having a low trust in something is not in itself problematic, but of course there's lots of other studies that also suggest that Australians have a certain lack of confidence that is limiting how they are going to adopt AI, and this is sort of implied by what Kate was saying. You can see this in a number of ways. You know, we've got this tension between Kate's notes. We've got extremely fast adoption of AI tools within Australia, but I like to go to forums such as these and do a bit of a straw poll of people in industry using tools and sort of say, how many of you are using ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, you name it, to help you with your personal productivity? And universally, almost everybody in the room puts their hand up. But then I ask, how many of you are doing that with the knowledge and understanding of your boss? And usually there's about half the room who sort of sheepishly put their hand down at that point. That's reflected in sort of sector studies that we see. We see whole bunches of sector studies that show shadow AI use being heavily prevalent across organisations. So they're helping to improve their personal productivity without the knowledge of their organisations. We also see it in a gap between AI use and AI policies within organisations. So one very recent example from a couple of weeks ago, Info Exchange, who work with not-for-profit organisations, have a digital technology in the not-for-profit sector report, which is in their 10th year this year. And they showed that 2/3 of not-for-profits are using some form of generative or conversational AI at the moment, and the remainder are basically planning to in the very near term, because of course not-for-profits tend to be very small organisations, often relying on volunteers, and so they need all the help they can get. And so of those folk who are all adopting generative AI, only 14% of these organisations have some form of AI policies, frameworks or guidelines in place. So we're talking about people who are working with some of the most vulnerable populations in Australia, and they are cracking ahead using AI, but they haven't put the appropriate things in place to do so safely. So as this pertains to AI literacy, We think the answer is that workers don't want to be left behind. That's why you're seeing all of this shadow AI use and other things. And so we want to make sure that they're able to adapt to this massive societal change and do so clearly, but that their organisations aren't scaffolding them with the appropriate tools, resources and support. So what does that mean for the National AI Centre? We think that NAIC has an opportunity to involve ourselves and to encourage the Australian market by unlock the opportunity of AI in 3 ways. One is to help grow the confidence of industry to innovate, develop and use AI. One is to help unlock the capability of Australian industry and workers to use AI to secure new opportunities. And one is to help deliver clarity in practical steps to develop and use AI safely. I'll give a couple of examples and then I'm sure some more will come out when we're chatting. On building confidence, NAIC think that this is found in the balance between safety and opportunity. We think communicating clearly that AI has both risks and opportunities and that we've got to be aware of the risks in order to seize those opportunities. And that helps build trustworthiness in the technology. So those of you who have been paying attention to the news in the last couple of days might have heard about the AI Safety Institute that was announced on Tuesday to be up and running in early 2026 within the Department of Industry, Science and Resources. And this institute is designed to help build public trust in AI through such core functions as monitoring and testing AI systems and working across government, because of course government is like every other large organisation, is complicated and has multiple parts who sometimes, need to make sure that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. The AI Safety Institute will work across government to ensure that legislation and regulation keep pace with technology development, which, as you all know, is breakneck. The National AI Centre want to make sure that we're working hand in hand with this AI Safety Institute because we need to make sure that Australian industry can benefit from the learnings and findings and guidance that the Australian Safety Institute will provide. There's a number of things that the National AI Centre are already doing in the space, however, to ensure that we're improving workers' AI literacy and organisations' overall AI maturity, and that speaks to those capability and clarity pieces that I mentioned. So first of all, we've just recently released, as of October, the Guidance for AI Adoption. What that is 6 key practices that organisations can adopt to help govern AI within their organisations, and particularly ensuring that they're using it in a human-centric manner. They're aware of the risks and aware of their needs of their stakeholders when they're implementing these AI technologies. We do monthly events with Committee for Economic Development of Australia. They have an AI Community of Practice, for example, which we're keenly involved with. And we do webinars ourselves to inform industry attendees of these updates. And finally, we partner with organisations like the Governance Institute, like Standards Australia, to run workshops, for example, to help organisation and board leaders to ensure that we meet them where they're at and we help them build their AI literacy so that they're governing AI within their organisations in an appropriate manner. And then for everyone else, for all of the workers in those organisations, we've also worked with the Institute for Applied Technology Digital in Australia to help make some introductory AI micro skills free for all Australians. And that helps to learn the basics of AI and really just start experimenting with that technology. And since that launch, we've seen over 150,000 enrolments in those micro skills. So I'll wrap up by just saying confidence, clarity, capability. That's how the NAIC sort of see the best approach to tackling the AI literacy problem and adoption in Australia, with literacy being that key pillar. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got Brett, tell me again your 3 words.
Confidence, clarity, capability.
Okay, your 3 words.
Technology, talent and trust.
And Steph, your 3, you actually had these.
I had 3 things, but they can be broken down into critical understanding, practical capability, and strategic application.
Okay, I think we're going to do a word cloud on these. They're like a 2. I'm going to math book my team. Alrighty, Evelyn.
All right, I don't think I have 3 exactly.
Policy Director of AVPN, and you're based in Malaysia.
Singapore.
Singapore.
Yes. Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be on this distinguished panel. Thank you, Kate and University of Melbourne for having us here. Maybe just for many of you who might not know us, AVPN is the largest social investor network channeling social impact funds to Asia. And so we have over 700 members in our network from within Asia as well as outside, including foundations, corporations, family offices, as well as multilateral organizations that are interested in channeling funds for social impact in Asia. And we work completely, in fact, through partnerships, and that's why I'm very excited to talk about the AI Opportunity Fund, which is supported by Google.org and the Asian Development Bank to equip workers and MSMEs across Asia and the Pacific for the AI-driven job transformation. And I know everyone here knows the importance of AI and transformation, but I'll give you a little bit more statistics for the academics in the room. I know statistics are important. So there was a study that showed that there's potential to add $3 trillion to the Asia-Pacific economy in key markets by 2030. And this would be very impactful for the 2 billion workers across Asia and the Pacific. And so how we actually manage to reach that potential, as has been mentioned today, is very important, and ensuring that it goes across all of these divides that our speakers have already talked about. So the AI Opportunity Fund aims to equip 720,000 workers and over 1,100 MSMEs across two phases of our work. So maybe I'll next really share about a few things. One is some research that we've done on how AI literacy has been received and understood by different populations. Second, some feedback and learnings that we've had from our training so far. And third, some of the success factors and challenges that we've seen to bring this down to a more regional as well as a more of a inclusive lens of how it's being received across the workforce. So before we embarked on the actual skilling initiatives that we've done, we did some research within the region to understand, because we know this is a diverse landscape, and we want to ensure that we're reaching those who can benefit the most and not just reaching those who we can reach easiest, because that's not the point of this. So some key learnings in this phase, as we know, youth are the ones who are the most willing to participate. So 1 in 5 already participated in some sort of skilling. By the way, this report was released on our website in May 2025, and I think it's also on the sheet, so you can share that later. Mature workers, on the other hand, between the ages of 50 and 65, are 1.6 times more likely to distrust AI and find that there's a language barrier for them. So there's a bit of a demographic divide there. There's also a skilling initiative gap. 91% of the workforce that we spoke to are eager to acquire new skills, but only 4% of business leaders implement workforce training at scale. Those with higher education, 50% are more optimistic, but they're also more aware of the risks than people who are less educated. And some priority groups that we found were most in need of training were women, indigenous people, remote and rural populations, the experienced workforce, people with disabilities, people going into transition, so young workforce coming back to work, those are experiencing digital barriers and literacy, and those of lower socioeconomic status, which I think is no surprise because these are the workforce that also may tend to have lower digital skills. So maybe I can go into the approach that we took when we were designing these trainings. And what we did was we took the core curriculum that we had developed from Google Materials as well as others within the ecosystem, and had strategic partners across various markets that then worked with local partners like nonprofits, associations, to really customize the material to local needs and tailor it in local languages. And so far we've had trained over 170,000 people, with 64% of them being women. And what we've seen generally is an increased confidence in using AI to support their professional and daily activities. Some even are having more impact by sharing their learnings within their communities, using AI to, for example, teachers using AI to support teaching methods, having a facilitator role to share with their others, classmates, and also even a doctor sharing, how he's changing the way that he's doing his daily rounds with other doctors. So we've really seen some quite cool examples that I wanted to share. For example, in the Philippines, we had small store owners, so these small businesses who started using AI after the trainings to design their promotions, create a price list, manage store records. Somebody who was trying to build, a person who was visually impaired, using AI to estimate the startup costs for a laundry business. And so it's really about having not just the foundational understanding of what AI is, but how does it really help your daily life? How does it help your professional life? So it's using hands-on labs, using case studies. One that I liked was personal solution mapping. So I think those are actually a lot of core teaching techniques that you can bring into AI. So even before you embark on it, say, what do you want it to do? And practical exercises like predictive analysis. And now I wish I also had this training, because that would be great to learn how to do with AI. And some agri applications. A female farmer in India mentioned that she learned how to use AI to support crop planning, plan for weather disruption, and design farming strategies. But they were also learning how to understand AI's potential for risk, understand how AI was created, and also understand how to spot and deal with misinformation, which I think is a very critical piece of AI literacy as well. And so I'll move on a little bit to some of these success factors and challenges as we think about skilling a broad swath of people who may not really have the same kind of experience with digital skills as we do in this room. So one thing that we found was really important is building that community trust. As Kay has mentioned before, we work with local training partners who have been working with these communities for decades. So they know exactly, well, not exactly what they need, but they're very familiar with the community, they're trusted. Then they help overcome that awareness gap as well of people who really need these skills, which I think is sometimes underestimated. Secondly, we find that customized and localized training content is very important. These are people who have tough lives, difficult lives. They are not going to sit for something that doesn't interest them, they can't see any use for right away. And there's also been a lot of benefit in having peer learning across training partners, actually. We had some, one of our markets, for example, is India, and there we had several different strategic partners because, as you know, India has many, many languages, many different regions. And so when they spoke to each other, they could share common challenges, common solutions that they're working on, including some very specific ones, like how do you plan across, campaigns, for political campaigns or disruptions in schedules and things like that may be specific to their market. And so maybe I'll move to some of the challenges that also have been mentioned by other members here. And one is there's some skepticism, but from our side, we receive some skepticism about free training. So why are you doing this? What are you trying to get out of us? And that is something that, working with local training partners, you can try to overcome as well. Some concerns about safety or job. If I learn this, is it going to actually, replace me and things like that. Low awareness and feeling like maybe this is not so relevant to me. There are also some factors around making sure that we spend more time customizing the content, because I think the reality is that even working with local training partners, we realize that sometimes people's basic literacy also means that they need additional help, additional one-on-one time, which I think was something that was mentioned in the panel before. There's something about instruction that you cannot take away, especially with people with low socioeconomic status or people with already digital barriers with literacy. So that actually took up additional time that we hadn't expected for certain markets and places. But I think that's also to be expected when you're trying to reach the hardest populations to reach, right? And there's still some structural issues like poor internet connectivity in some places, very hard to reach areas. But again, I think working with local communities, they are the ones who are the best suited in figuring out how to work around some of these issues to make sure that content is used. And we see that people's lives really do change. They do feel that it's helped them in many ways. And so we think this is an effort that's very important and continue to work towards refining this model and improving it as we go along. Yeah, I'm very happy to talk more about our work, and we'll continue sharing these learnings and hope to, and we're also exploring ways to share more of this content so that outside of these 720,000 workers that we're reaching directly, that this content can also be used for others. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. And I think this is an amazing story, and I know that people will be really looking forward to hearing part 2 of what you've been doing with the training program and those regional examples. We're coming now to our final speaker, and it is the final speaker before lunch, but this is, I think you'll find this work very interesting. So Associate Professor Greg Nyilasy, he has an amazing lab called Behave AI. So that's combining behavioural economics, insights to psychology and how people react to AI. So just incredible work. We could have a whole day on this, as we could have on AVPN's work. So Greg, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeannie.
And we do have handouts, so the information is on there.
So indeed, I represent Behave AI, which is a new lab that the Faculty of Business and Economics established. And the purpose is simple, and the mission is simple. And it's basically to redirect some of the dialogue from the technology onto the human for a number of reasons. One is that, well, we are all human, and so therefore, at the end of the day, we care about human flourishing and human wellness and human productivity in the case of business. Of course, we are a business school, so we focus on business issues such as AI in the workplace, consumption, social impact, and the teaching of business with AI. Now, when it comes to media literacy or AI literacy, naturally then our perspective is psychological on this, because as important as the media literacy frameworks are from a policy standpoint, really our take on this is that we need to double click and understand the details of the human psyche behind this literacy to really fully understand it. So our purpose is to do mostly experimental work. So I'm a behavioral scientist, I do experiments, but basically any kind of method that would shed light on the human psyche when it comes to the use of AI. Now, I prepared 3 themes that I think are going to be very important in 2026, and we certainly spend a lot of effort on this in our lab. One is that AI is not a singular thing. The second is the question of autonomy, which I will spend some time on. And the third I labeled modes of interaction. So the first theme, AI is not one. Maybe that's self-evident. And it's convenient for us to talk about AI as a singular entity, but it is not. It is multiple things. So at the very least, there's 3 types of AI that are being floated right now. There's the old AI, machine learning, the type of AI that you see, let's say, in Netflix, which is predictive. And what it does is it predicts the next step. You have a certain history of watching certain films. It predicts you what the next should be. If I look at the human psychology of this, it's quite a passive stance for the human, because all the human can say, yes, I will watch it or not. But basically, the human control is limited. Now, contrast this with LLMs and ChatGPT and OpenAI. Very clearly, that's a very different scenario, right? Because the human has a lot of control. In fact, I would say 50% of the story is the human who puts in the prompt, the human who puts the context, uploads the documents, interprets what comes back. So if we say we want to understand this type of AI, at least 50%, I would say you need to understand the human doing it. I have to understand myself doing this. So clearly that puts media literacy or AI literacy in a very different framework than what we had in old AI. But this is not the end, because now we are talking about agentic AI. So agentic AI, we don't really know what that really means, but let's say the typical example people would give is you'd be able to allow your computer to book tickets at Qantas without your active involvement. So it would somehow figure out what your preferences are and just go ahead and do it. Now again, that from a human psychological standpoint is a very different scenario than using ChatGPT, right? In some ways, that's kind of going back to old AI because you might lose some of this agency or autonomy that you had before. So these are big three, I'd say, buckets, but there's a multiplication of modalities. So there's text, there's video, there's speech. There's different brands, there's different personalities. Just this week, a professor at Wharton, Ethan Mollick, did a mini experiment with asking basically the same pointed question in an entrepreneurship class from 10 different brands of LLMs with vastly different results, right? So if you think about literacy and people trying to understand what is happening to them, you have to feel sympathetic to humans because there's quite a bit of complexity across all these domains. Now, my second big theme would be agency or autonomy. Now, this is particularly important with agentic AI. We don't have it yet, but we are going in that direction. Ultimately, the question is, how can we assure that the human stays in control? And what would be the drivers of that? We all differ individual differences in terms of need for autonomy. Some people might not even understand what this autonomy means. Actually, we need to reconsider this notion of autonomy with agentic AI in particular, of to what exactly are we giving over agency and autonomy to the machine. And it is going to be different from a Netflix scenario, from a ChatGPT scenario. It is going to be something entirely different. And on the IT side, people have to work out protocols of how that would happen. But from the human side, the same has to happen. I need to have protocols which some people label AI governance literacy. This is crazy. You would think, some people don't even have electricity or don't even have the basic AI skills. And now we are talking about sort of board-level oversight, thinking about how I would allow my agents to act. This is way more complex than what we had before, and it's way more complex than media literacy in a general sense. I would also say that I need to think in this world of my own agency differently, because if I'm very productive, if I'm very agentic, all of a sudden now I'm in a different reality, and I have to understand myself having perhaps more agency or less than ever before. And my third theme would be specific insights on modes of interaction. I think there's a sharp contrast with media literacy frameworks and what we need for AI and all these different types of AI. Because these interaction problems that arise in this environment where the human is very active are markedly different from just consuming media. I mean, that's difficult enough. Representation and political bias and all those things are, I guess, replicated in the AI world. But now we have active humans interacting with these machines in unknown ways. Some of these issues come from the machine. I would call these systems issues, and things like context rot, model drift, AI misalignment, epistemic issues, misinformation, things like this. And you could say, well, the systems will improve and humans will catch up and understand what's going to them. But it's a daunting task, and you have to be sympathetic, I think, with humans and human psychology dealing with this, because this one idea of context rot, what does that mean? I keep on prompting, and the more I put in, at some point, the quality of the responses coming back might be worse. So these types of phenomena are difficult for humans to understand. And media literacy, I agree with some of the who spoke before me, has to be a continuous and ongoing project, because it is not like once you've done it, you're set and forget. It's not going to be like that. I also think that there's quite a bit that we need to spend on detection, but that's not the only thing. The university spends a lot of effort on detection, right? Whether the students use AI or not. And in that context, it's important for us to be able to detect whether something was composed by AI. And by the way, what percent? What is the human-AI ratio? Was it 100% AI, or was it 10%? And in what context is this relevant at all? In the context of university education, it is very relevant, I would say. But in the context of some collaborative work, like let's say I'm in an advertising agency and I brainstorm with my partner, and my partner is giving me content that was partly produced by AI, it's kind of irrelevant, because at the end of the day, I have ability to override it and change it and build on it. And again, AI literacy has to have an oversight over all of this. When is it okay to use AI? When is it not okay to use AI? What is happening to my counterparty? Is it okay for my counterparty, for which I don't have full information, to use AI or not? And how do I even know? So all these issues in the workplace, for example, are going to be paramount in the next coming years. There's also, I think it was mentioned even in the previous panel, of fluency and sycophancy and hyper persuasion. These systems are very persuasive. So we need to come to terms with a situation where no matter how much media literacy or AI literacy we produce, there is a system that is going to be more persuasive than anything ever before. And therefore, we need to have interventions and we struggle even with social media misinformation. So how is it going to happen in this sort of hyper-persuasive environment? So there's many other issues that our lab wants to look at. I guess my main message here is that we need to think about human psychology in a more detailed manner. These frameworks are very useful. A lot of these AI frameworks are already in place and are useful. However, they cover a lot of ground, and maybe there's not a lot of depth. And so there's room for actually looking at particular areas and generate more insight, especially so that we could generate better interventions.
Thank you so much, and I think you can agree with me. We would have loved to hear more from all of our speakers, and the new words I've picked up from you, Greg, are agency modes of interaction, which I think is splendid, but also that pertinent comment with media literacy. And I think actually that comment about we can't expect the humans to give up brings us right back full circle to the earlier session with Simon on regulation, right? Because that's where we land. Now, we are at time. I'm going to